Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Jeremy Hartwell fled the tech world for a quiet life in the Colorado woods, he thought he'd left madness behind. But peace turned to war when a relentless HOA president demanded his private pool for the community. What followed? A suburban showdown no one saw coming. When I left Seattle and the tech world behind, all I wanted was peace, privacy, and a place where no one would bother me about lawn color palettes or approved mailbox styles. I had spent almost 2 decades building a company from nothing, survived venture capital vampires and 2 acquisitions, and finally cashed out just north of 40. I didn't want a penthouse in Manhattan or a super yacht in Miami. I wanted land, silence, trees, and a home that didn't have to match the neighbors. So I bought 9 acres in the foothills outside Boulder, Colorado, a heavily wooded piece of heaven with a private gravel drive, natural rock formations, and no homeowners association within legal sniffing distance. I built a minimalist, concrete and glass estate tucked into the slope of a ridge, designed with every inch of purpose. There was a separate wing for my elderly mother, space for my daughters to run wild, and a pool with a vanishing edge that opened into the forest like something out of a Bond villain's Pinterest board. It was my castle. I'd been living there for about 6 weeks when the first red flag arrived in a crisp envelope bearing a gold-embossed crest, Clear Valley Hills Homeowners Association. Curious, I opened it at the kitchen island, expecting some generic welcome flyer or maybe a local event schedule. Instead, it read, "Dear Mr. Hartwell, in the interest of fostering goodwill and community development, the Clear Valley Hills HOA Board has resolved to initiate the construction of a community access pool on your property. Given your ample resources and spacious estate, we are requesting that you provide full financial sponsorship and land use for this public benefit project. Our architectural committee would be happy to coordinate the design and manage the build. Suggested features include a cabana, shower area, and guest parking. We look forward to your cooperation. Sincerely, Karen Stockbridge, President, Clear Valley Hills HOA." I actually looked around my kitchen for cameras. Surely this was a prank, or satire, or a late April Fool's joke. I didn't respond. I figured silence would do the trick. But Karen, as I would soon learn, was not the type of woman deterred by silence. The next morning, I was in the garage reconfiguring a storage rack when I heard a knock at the front door. Not the gate, not the call box, the front door. Which meant someone had come up my private driveway, through the trees, past the warning signs, and decided that was perfectly fine. It was her. Karen Stockbridge stood on my porch like she was claiming uncharted territory. Late 50s, surgical tan, precision bob, and a blue blazer that practically screamed board meeting. She didn't smile. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, extending a hand like we were at a country club and not in the middle of the woods. "I trust you received our letter." I nodded slowly. I did. I thought it was a joke. Her mouth twitched. "I assure you, the board is quite serious. The community has no recreational water access, and your pool, well, it's so tastefully done. You clearly have the resources. This is an opportunity to give back." "To give back," I repeated, still trying to process the sheer gall of it. "You do realize I'm not part of your HOA, right?" Karen tilted her head, like a therapist preparing to explain a basic truth to a stubborn child. "All properties within the Clear Valley perimeter are subject to shared expectations, regardless of technicalities. Proximity implies participation. It's a matter of civic spirit." "Proximity implies participation," I repeated, staring. "Lady, I've got deer closer to my living room window than I do your HOA clubhouse." She took a breath through her nose. "There's no need for sarcasm. I'm simply here to offer a path forward. You could fund something meaningful. Or—" her gaze slid toward the trees. "We could take a more formal route." That did it. I actually laughed, loud and from the chest. "Let me be absolutely clear, Karen. There's no we. There's no path. There's you. And there's my property. And the next time someone bypasses my gate without permission, they'll be met by my attorney." Not a smile. Her face stiffened. "So that's your final word." I smiled wider. "That's my opening statement." She left without another word. No handshake. No smile. Just a twitch in her jaw that told me I hadn't heard the last of her. And as I watched her Mercedes wind its way back through the trees, I had the strange, specific feeling that my peaceful life was about to get interesting. It started 2 days after Karen marched off my porch like I'd insulted the ghost of her dead husband. I woke up early, poured myself a coffee, and stepped out onto the upper deck to soak in some silence before the kids woke up. That's when I saw the signs. 4 metal placards had been staked into the dirt along the narrow public easement that ran parallel to my property line, just outside the fence. Big, bold letters: Construction Zone Community Improvement Project, Clear Valley Hills HOA. Smaller print beneath: Pedestrian detour in effect. I stood there with my mug, blinking like I was still half asleep. The signs weren't on my land, but they were damn close, and from a distance, they looked like I was building something on my own property for the neighborhood. I walked down and checked. Sure enough, the stakes were hammered just outside my boundary, on public right-of-way, but positioned deliberately to make it look like something major was about to happen on my side. Cute. I called the county office just to be safe. They confirmed no permits had been issued for anything in the area. I asked them to send someone to take a look. Meanwhile, I emailed my lawyer and sent photos. That afternoon, I went to pick up groceries with my daughter Lily. As I was loading bags into the trunk, a man in a Patagonia vest nodded to me. "So when's the pool supposed to open?" he asked casually. I turned. "Excuse me. Karen said you were building a community pool. Said it was already approved. She mentioned something about eco-friendly filters and solar shade panels." I smiled politely. "Karen says a lot of things. You should hear what she says about the moon landing." He blinked. I shut the trunk. Over the next few days, the rumors spread like a gas leak. I overheard 2 women at the local coffee shop talking about the new guy who's too rich to care about anyone but himself. At the post office, someone handed me a community event flyer that read, "It takes a village, unless your neighbor builds walls instead of bridges." Nice try, Karen. But what pissed me off most was what happened to my mother. She went out for a short walk one morning, same loop she always did, quiet and safe. When she came back, she looked rattled. "Some woman approached me," she said, setting her cane against the wall, "told me your father would have been ashamed of how selfish you turned out. That money makes men cruel." My father had passed 2 years ago. I walked out the door, pulled footage from our driveway cam, and rewound the morning. There she was, Karen, wearing a lilac tracksuit and a self-satisfied grin, talking to my 76-year-old mother like she was a war criminal. I sent the clip to my lawyer with a subject line that read, "Your favorite sociopath, now starring in elder harassment." That night, I installed 2 more cameras, added a motion sensor near the mailbox, and filed a formal report with the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, citing harassment and false public messaging. Then I started documenting everything, every sign, every comment, every passive-aggressive whisper. I kept a folder on my desktop labeled Clear Valley Delusions. I even printed out the HOA's own covenants from their website. Guess what? Not a single clause mentioned my property. Because, of course, it wasn't theirs. The final straw that week was a voicemail left on my business line, the one I used for my side consulting work. Some anonymous voice, clearly a neighbor, said, "Look, man, we're just asking you to do the right thing. It's one pool. You could fund 5 of them and still fly private. Stop being a dick." So that's where we were now. Not just false assumptions. Not just pressure, but a full-blown community guilt trip. And I wasn't even a part of their damn community. By the end of that week, I had 3 folders, one for evidence, one for legal correspondence, and one I labeled Plans for War. Because if Karen thought I was just going to sit back and wait for her next move, she hadn't done her homework. The thing about living in the woods is that you assume silence equals solitude. But one Saturday morning, I opened the front gate and stepped into a spectacle straight out of a rich people fever dream. 12 people lined up along my eastern property fence, matching t-shirts that read Clear Valley United in cheerful font, homemade signs in hand. One guy even had a damn megaphone. "Boycott Hartwell greed. Community before cash. If you swim alone, you drown alone." I blinked, took a sip of coffee, and stood there in disbelief, watching the neighborhood version of a failed cult reenactment unfold on my own border. Karen, of course, stood dead center, sunglasses, clipboard, that same smug tilt of her chin like she'd just won a battle I hadn't realized we were fighting. She spotted me and offered a wave. "Good morning, Jeremy. Just exercising our First Amendment rights." I walked over, phone already recording, calm as a surgeon. Karen, what in the chemically bleached hell is this? She smiled. Visibility. You ignored our letters. You dismissed our proposal. This is the community speaking. On the shoulder of a private driveway. We're technically on public easement. And technically full of it. Karen stepped closer, dropping the smile. You could have cooperated. You could have contributed. But instead, you mocked us. You laughed in my face. You threatened legal action because I didn't donate a water park to your neighborhood. She tilted her head. You left us no choice. The board voted. We're pursuing this through official channels. You're suing me, I said, raising an eyebrow. Karen didn't answer. She just turned and walked back to the line of picketers like some wannabe general retreating after delivering the terms of surrender. I stood there for another minute, documenting everything. They weren't blocking my access, technically. They weren't trespassing, but the message was loud and clear. I was now the local villain in their HOA mythology. Later that day, I got a call from my friend Gabe, who lived in Denver but kept a weekend cabin 2 streets over. Dude, he said, you're in the newsletter. What newsletter? Clear Valley Weekly. I'm on the mailing list for laughs. Headline reads, Wealth Without Responsibility. Local resident rejects community appeal. I laughed. Do they have a printing press powered by resentment? But it wasn't funny when my daughter came home from school on Monday and asked why a boy in her class called me a selfish hoarder. That night, I rechecked all camera angles, downloaded off-site backups, and updated my attorney. I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, 2 days later, I opened my mailbox and pulled out a thick envelope stamped with a return address from a law firm I'd never heard of. Clear Valley Hills Homeowners Association. Jeremy Hartwell filed in district court. Inside were documents filled with convoluted language, maps I'd never seen before, and accusations that were borderline science fiction. According to the filing, my land sat on historical community access grounds, whatever that meant, contained a private utility with regional relevance, in my pool, and was functionally integrated into the Clear Valley Hills community by proximity and shared aesthetics. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the pages into the fire pit. Shared aesthetics. I built a postmodern bunker carved into a hillside. Their HOA was composed of beige McMansions and faux Tuscan garden gnomes. But I knew this wasn't about winning in court. This was about exhausting me, smearing me, backing me into a corner. Karen didn't want justice. She wanted capitulation, compliance, control. And she was about to find out what happened when you tried to publicly shame a man who'd made his fortune by never playing anyone else's game. I sat at my dining table, flipping through the lawsuit page by page, while my mother stirred her tea like she was trying to dissolve a ghost in it. My lawyer, Dana Arledge, was on speakerphone. So let me get this straight, I said, tapping the stack. They're claiming I owe them access to my pool because of regional relevance. Dana chuckled darkly. That's the phrase they went with. Yes. And what the hell is a shared aesthetic obligation clause? Not a real thing. I've already highlighted 4 fabricated doctrines and at least 2 doctored maps. Doctored maps? I asked, straightening. Yup. One of their attachments shows your land outlined in red inside HOA boundaries. But when I cross-checked it with Boulder County records, your parcel was excluded from the HOA incorporation in 2003. Deliberately. Your property predates their subdivision by 5 years. So they lied to the court. They forged supporting documents, she said calmly, which means they went from stupid to criminal. I exhaled, looked over at my mother, who was now reading the document upside down and muttering something about people who should have been spanked more. I flipped the folder shut. Let's hit back. The next morning, we filed a countersuit, not just to dismiss their claim, but to put them on trial. Our countersuit included defamation for distributing false information to neighbors and online, intentional infliction of emotional distress citing the targeted harassment campaign that affected my mother and daughters, attempted property fraud for forging maps and legal boundaries in a court filing, civil conspiracy with clear involvement from multiple board members in a coordinated effort. Dana also filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies against the HOA and its legal representation. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was burning the road behind me, But we didn't stop there. I called a friend in Denver, Travis Kwan, a licensed land surveyor and former military engineer. He agreed to come up with his crew and do a complete perimeter scan of my property and surrounding parcels. Their equipment was military grade and GPS mapped down to the inch. 3 days later, Travis handed me a full 3D render of my land and its legal boundaries. It was irrefutable, and it made their forged map look like it was scribbled with a crayon by a drunk toddler. We also subpoenaed email correspondence from the HOA board. Dana had a hunch they'd been sloppy. She was right. Within a week, we received a leaked internal email chain from a disgruntled board member, someone who didn't like the direction this war had taken. In the emails, Karen literally said, "We all know he's not technically in the HOA, but public pressure might bring him into compliance. If not, litigation will force him to spend enough that he'll either break or settle." Another board member replied, "What if he fights?" Karen answered, "Then we drown him in process." Dana forwarded the chain to the judge with a motion to strike the original complaint as malicious. Meanwhile, things at Clear Valley Hills were beginning to crack. 2 board members resigned quietly. A third requested legal counsel. And whispers started floating that Karen hadn't even gotten full consent from the board before initiating the lawsuit. Then came the anonymous tip. A brown envelope left in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a copy of the HOA's last internal budget sheet. Line item, legal allocation, special enforcement initiative, $38,000. There had never been a vote. No homeowner input. Karen had authorized it alone. She'd weaponized HOA funds to attack someone not even under their jurisdiction. I handed everything to Dana and leaned back in my chair, staring through the floor-to-ceiling glass wall at the forest beyond. They wanted to play games. I built systems for a living. They wanted war. I had strategy, evidence, and money. They had Karen. And now the system was about to bite back. You know someone's rattled when they stop pretending. Karen had gone eerily quiet. No more HOA newsletters about community values. No more passive-aggressive Facebook posts signed "Dash Your Neighbors." No lawn walkers with signs. It was like the whole subdivision was holding its breath, waiting to see if their queen would fall or drag everyone down with her. Meanwhile, I was working with Dana like we were preparing for federal indictment proceedings. Every day brought new leads, new emails, new pieces of this deranged puzzle. One of the first cracks came from an unexpected source. Calvin DeWitt, a retired orthopedic surgeon and former board secretary at Clear Valley Hills. I hadn't even known the man existed, but one afternoon Dana forwarded me a voicemail he left on her office line. "I was part of the board until last fall. I want nothing to do with this madness. But I can tell you this, Karen's been doing things behind the board's back for years. She thinks the HOA is her personal fiefdom." We scheduled a meeting. Calvin showed up to Dana's office wearing loafers, an old fishing vest, and the expression of a man who'd lived through 3 divorces and still feared a 4th. He didn't want publicity. He didn't want to be named. But he gave us everything. A printed archive of internal emails where Karen dismissed concerns from board members who questioned her legal tactics. Meeting notes showing how she withheld financial reports from the HOA General Assembly. A 2021 memo where she pushed to annex neighboring parcels through informal understanding rather than legal procedure. But the most damning thing, a scanned copy of a private note she sent to the treasurer authorizing a transfer of $38,000 from the HOA's Capital Improvement Fund into a legal contingency account labeled Sundown Project. That was the money funding the lawsuit against me. Dana took the documents straight to the Boulder County Civil Oversight Office and filed a complaint of financial misconduct under false pretenses. Then Travis, my surveyor, called. "We got something weird," he said. He emailed over a comparative analysis between the forged HOA map and the county GIS files. Turns out the fake map wasn't just off. It had deliberately adjusted the parcel grid to move my boundary line 30 feet inward. I asked him the obvious. "Who submitted it?" He replied, "The PDF metadata shows it was generated on a MacBook registered to a Karen S." I nearly dropped my phone. We compiled it all into one airtight evidence package. Dana attached it to our countersuit as an addendum titled "Intentional Geographic Misrepresentation with Fraudulent Intent." I was so buried in documents and calls that I didn't notice the second fracture until the press reached out. A reporter from the Boulder Herald left a message. "Mr. Hartwell, we've received an anonymous tip from within Clear Valley Hills about an HOA abuse scandal. Would you like to comment before publication?" They sent over the draft headline, "HOA Gone Rogue. Exclusive. Lawsuit against non-member Sparks. Financial and legal scandal." By the time the article went live that weekend, the neighborhood was on fire. Residents began demanding an emergency HOA meeting. Several longtime owners published open letters calling for Karen's resignation. Someone even spray-painted "Queen Karen must go" on the HOA's decorative stone wall. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, but all I felt was momentum. This wasn't over. Not until every inch of my land, and every right tied to it, was defended, proven, and protected, and not until Karen answered for every inch she tried to steal. The courtroom was small, modern, and surprisingly cold, not in temperature, but in mood. It wasn't the grand echoing chamber I had imagined. Just beige walls, creaky chairs, and fluorescent lights that hummed with quiet menace. But the tension, you could carve it with a dull spoon. Karen sat at the opposite table dressed in a navy blue blazer like she thought she was still presiding over a garden club. Her face was tighter than I'd ever seen it, like she'd forgotten how to smile. She wasn't alone. 2 HOA board members sat behind her, visibly uncomfortable. One of them, I think her name was Ellie, kept shifting in her seat, as if her conscience was chewing a hole through her spine. My side was leaner, just me, Dana, and a court clerk helping organize exhibits. But we had the most important thing Karen didn't. Truth backed by cold, unforgiving paper. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with reading glasses halfway down her nose, opened with a flat tone. "This court will now hear arguments in the matter of Hartwell vs. Clear Valley Hills HOA, and the countersuit as filed." Karen's attorney led the opening, trying to paint me as an arrogant outsider who refused basic community cooperation. He spoke of mutual benefit and harm to neighborhood harmony, as if HOA dominance was enshrined in the Constitution. When it was Dana's turn, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace. She simply walked the court through the evidence. The forged map, and the metadata showing Karen as the author, the unauthorized fund transfer, the HOA charter which clearly excluded my parcel, and finally the email from Calvin DeWitt, read aloud in full. Karen has repeatedly manipulated the HOA's internal mechanisms for her personal vision, including attempts to annex land without membership approval. I did not consent to these actions and withdrew from the board in protest. Then came the surprise witness. We hadn't planned it, but as court recessed for lunch, Ellie, the jittery board member, pulled Dana aside and whispered, "I want to speak." So after the break, Dana called her to the stand as a hostile witness. She was visibly shaking as she took her oath. "I didn't know about the fake map until 3 days ago. Karen said she had legal advisors reviewing expansion zones, but we never saw details. When I asked for specifics, she threatened to cut me out of the annual board renewal." The room froze. She said, "No one questions what's good for Clear Valley Hills." That's when I realized this wasn't a community. It was her kingdom. Karen's face drained of color. Dana then submitted a flash drive. It contained the full forensic trail of the map fabrication, including screen captures of the file creation path, the name Karen.S-MBP, and timestamps correlating with HOA board meeting days. The judge asked one question. Did the defendant disclose this document's origins at any point during pretrial discovery? Karen's lawyer tried to hedge. The judge cut him off. "I see. This court will recess until tomorrow, pending review of potential sanctions." Outside, news cameras were already gathering. I didn't speak to them. I just walked past the microphones with one hand on my mother's shoulder. She'd come to watch. She whispered, "She's cracking." And she was right. Karen didn't show up the next morning. Her attorney arrived alone and informed the judge that his client was under medical stress and unable to appear. The judge didn't buy it. "We will proceed, and the defendant will be subpoenaed if necessary." I looked at Dana. She gave me the tiniest nod. We had her. Now we just had to finish it clean. The judge's voice carried more weight that morning, like the air in the courtroom itself had thickened. "Ms. Stockbridge's absence is noted. This court finds no valid basis for delay," she announced, her tone sharper than a gavel. "Proceed." Dana stood with all the grace of a fencer mid-duel. "Our position remains. The HOA's lawsuit is based entirely on fabricated claims, manipulated documentation, and abuse of administrative power. We're no longer arguing a zoning issue. We are standing before this court in a case of fraud, coercion, and personal retaliation." I watched the judge nod slowly, eyes narrowing. Then came the avalanche. Dana submitted additional bank records, not just the first transfer Karen authorized without a board vote, but 3 more. Together, over $60,000 in legal retainers had been paid out from community funds, all without member consent. The judge visibly frowned. Then came the HOA's internal messages, leaked by Ellie after her testimony, screenshots of a private signal group between Karen and her inner circle, where she referred to me as the new money pest and openly joked about bringing his kingdom into the fold by force or finesse. The room went silent as that phrase echoed. Force or finesse? I don't think I breathed for a full minute. Dana let it hang before continuing. This is no longer a civil disagreement between neighbors. This is a documented campaign to absorb land through intimidation, lies, and weaponized bureaucracy. Then, with a perfect rhythm, she handed over the final exhibit, a notarized complaint from the HOA treasurer, one I hadn't even seen yet. After reviewing the books, I believe Mrs. Stockbridge has been misappropriating funds for at least 18 months. I am resigning effective immediately and will cooperate with investigators. The judge adjusted her glasses. Understood. Mr. Hartwell, your counterclaims will be reviewed first. She paused. But I will say now, for the record, this court sees credible evidence of document fraud, civil conspiracy, and misappropriation of community assets. I am referring this to the district attorney. My chest tightened. Dana leaned in. That's the criminal side kicking in. Outside the courthouse, reporters now swarmed. I gave a short statement. The facts speak for themselves. I just want my family left in peace. That afternoon, a plainclothes investigator from the DA's office came by my house. He didn't knock hard. He just asked for a brief statement and whether I had any additional documents Karen may have sent me directly. I gave him everything. The letter, the voicemail, even the printed flyer from the pool protest. He smiled tightly and said, "You'll want to keep an eye on tomorrow's docket." And he was right. At noon the next day, Karen Stockbridge was arrested on 3 felony charges: fraudulent misrepresentation, falsification of public records, and embezzlement. They pulled her from her home in a gray blouse and pearl necklace, handcuffed and tight-lipped. Someone filmed it from a balcony across the street. The footage hit local news within the hour. The HOA board held an emergency meeting that night. 3 members resigned. 2 more submitted letters distancing themselves. By morning, the HOA had no quorum, no leadership, and no credibility. It didn't just collapse, it imploded. By the time the dust settled, the phrase Clear Valley Hills HOA had become toxic. 2 days after Karen's arrest, the County Land Commission suspended all pending proposals from the association. The state AG's office launched an audit into their past 10 years of filings. Local papers ran headlines like HOA President Charged After Demanding Pool from Millionaire Neighbor and Karen Culture Goes Criminal. Meanwhile, my gate camera caught a steady stream of former HOA members quietly walking past my property, some glancing over sheepishly. No one knocked, no one spoke. Dana called on a Monday with good news. The court had ruled entirely in our favor. Not only was the HOA's lawsuit dismissed with prejudice, but we were awarded full damages, $450,000 for legal costs, defamation, trespassing, and emotional distress. The judge wrote in her opinion, "This case reflects a gross misuse of civil process and a dangerous misunderstanding of property rights. Mr. Hartwell's autonomy was never up for community negotiation." I had the line printed and framed. It now hangs beside my coffee maker. A week later, I got a formal letter from the DA's office. Karen had accepted a plea deal, 10 years suspended to 5, with mandatory restitution and a permanent bar on holding any HOA position ever again. Her assistant, the one who gave up the falsified documents, was given immunity in exchange for cooperation. Ellie, the former board member who testified, sent me a short handwritten thank you note. I was afraid of her too. It read, "Thanks for standing your ground." I didn't reply. Some victories speak for themselves. 3 properties in Clear Valley Hills filed to formally withdraw from the HOA. The structure collapsed within weeks. The neighborhood eventually voted to dissolve the HOA altogether, reverting to county governance. I quietly met with a local land planner and submitted an application to reclassify the edge of my property as a private recreational conservation zone. No commercial developments, no shared infrastructure, no HOA eligible attachments, just legally reinforced solitude. It passed without objection. That spring, I threw a party. Not a spectacle, just a modest gathering of friends and family. My daughters helped decorate. My mom brought too many desserts. My dog barked at balloons. I stood on the flagstone deck, looking over my pool as the sun hit the infinity edge and raised a glass. A simple sign on my gate now read, "Pool is private. So is the owner." Sometimes peace doesn't come from compromise. Sometimes it comes from defending what's already yours. And I sleep just fine.